Remember when a pound note meant something? When that green piece of paper in your dad's hand on a Thursday evening could feed the whole family and still leave change for a pint? When 10 pence bought a loaf of bread and 25 pence bought fish and chips wrapped in newspaper with vinegar soaking through and the whole house smelling like Friday? The British pound was not just currency. It was a promise, an honest deal between what you earned and what you could afford. A working man's wage bought a working man's life, and nobody thought twice about it. But somewhere between decimalization and debit cards and £4 coffees in paper cups, that promise was broken. The pound survived, but everything it used to buy disappeared. This is what £1 bought in 1970s Britain. And these prices will make you wonder what happened to this country. Welcome to the channel. We tell the stories of the Britain we actually remember, the one that made sense. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and drop your old prices in the comments below. Trust me, some of your memories are better than anything we could ever script. In 1970, the average working man over 21 took home £28 a week. That is what Hansard recorded in Parliament that January. His wife, if she worked, earned roughly half that, £14. By 1975, the average pay packet had climbed to just under £40 a week. By the end of the decade, it reached £93. But here is the thing. Even at £28 a week, a family could manage. Not in luxury. Nobody is pretending it was easy. But the numbers worked, the rent got paid, the table had food on it, there was enough left for a Friday treat, and maybe a few bob put away in the post office savings book for a rainy day. And then there was the house. The average home in 1970 cost £4,057. That was roughly 4 times the average yearly income. 4 times. Today, the average house in Britain costs over £290,000. That is almost 9 times the average salary. A young couple in 1973, him working at the Ford plant in Dagenham, her doing part-time at Boots on the High Street, could save for a deposit in 2 or 3 years. They could buy a decent 3-bedroom semi in Basildon or Corby or Kirkby and have it paid off before they were 50. Try telling that to a 25-year-old today who cannot afford a studio flat in Slough. But it was not the big purchases that made life feel different. It was the small ones, the everyday prices that now sound like they belong in a history book. Walk into any Tesco or Fine Fair in 1973 and a white sliced loaf costs 10 pence. A tin of Heinz baked beans costs 7.5 pence. Heinz tomato soup, the one in the red and white tin that every kitchen cupboard in Britain seemed to have, cost 8 pence. A box of Kellogg's cornflakes cost 11 pence. A £1/2 of Anchor butter cost 10.5 pence. 2 pounds of Tate and Lyle sugar cost 10 pence. A £1/4 of Typhoo loose leaf tea cost 8 pence. These are not estimates. These are the exact prices recorded by Which magazine in their 1973 grocery basket survey. Real products, real shops, real prices that real families were paying. And it was not just the supermarket. Walk down to the local chippy in 1973 and a small bag of chips cost 5 pence. Medium was 7 pence. Large was 9 pence. A full portion of cod and chips in 1970 cost 25 pence. 25 pence. Today, the average fish and chips in Britain costs somewhere between £8 and £12. That is not inflation. That is a different universe. Now picture the pub, not some gastropub in Islington with craft beer at £7 a pint and a sharing platter for £22, a proper local. The sort of place with a dartboard on the wall, horse brasses above the fireplace, and a carpet that stuck to your shoes in ways you tried not to think about. In 1972, a pint of Double Diamond cost between 15 and 18 pence. Watney's Red, the same. Courage Tavern, the same. A pint of Guinness cost between 16 and 20 pence. These were the prices recorded by the Consumers Association in Which magazine that April. A man could walk into the public bar of the Dog and Duck, buy 3 pints across the evening, and leave with change from £1. He would know everyone there. The landlord knew his name. The barmaid knew his drink before he reached the bar. That was not just cheap beer. That was a community at a price that working people could actually afford. Then there was petrol. In 1970, a gallon of 4 stars cost 33 pence. That is 6 shillings and 8 pence in old money for anyone who still thinks in proper currency. You could fill the tank of your Ford Cortina Mark III for about £2. The AA Motoring Trust kept records going back to 1896, and even they confirmed that fuel in the early 70s was remarkably affordable. A bloke in Wolverhampton could drive his Austin Allegro to work 5 days a week, run the wife to her mother's on Sunday, and take the kids to Barry Island for a day out in August, all without petrol costs keeping him awake at night. By 1979, a gallon had crept up to just under £1. People were furious. They called it daylight robbery. If only they could see what was coming. A first-class stamp in 1972 cost 3 pence. 3 pence to send a letter anywhere in Britain. Today, it costs over £1.35. The Daily Mirror, the most popular newspaper in Britain at the time, cost 5 old pence in 1970. The Daily Telegraph cost the same. By 1979, both had risen to around 10 pence. Today, the Telegraph alone costs over £4. A long-playing record costs between 77 pence and £2.25. A colour television licence costs £12 for the whole year. A brand new Mini 850 sat in the showroom for under £700. But the prices only tell half the story. What really mattered was what those prices unlocked. The rituals, the routines, the small, sacred moments of ordinary life that money could buy when money still meant something. Saturday morning, 1974. A boy of 9 years old in Salford wakes up, eats his Weetabix, and heads out with 20 pence in his pocket. His mum gave him 10. He earned the other 10 doing a paper round for Mr. Patel at the newsagent on the corner. His first stop is the sweet shop, not a chain, a proper shop with glass jars lining the shelves from floor to ceiling. Blackjacks at a halfpenny each. Fruit salads are the same. Flying saucers, Parma violets, Anglo bubbly bubblegum. He points at the jars one by one, and the lady behind the counter scoops them into a small white paper bag. 10 pence buys him a bag so full he can barely close the top. He walks out feeling like a millionaire. Next stop is the ABC Miners at the Odeon on the High Street. Saturday morning pictures. A few pence to get in. Cartoons on the big screen. Flash Gordon serials. Hundreds of kids shouting and stamping their feet and throwing popcorn at each other while the usherette with the torch tried to keep order. Nobody managed the children. Nobody needed to. It was organized chaos, and every kid in the neighborhood was there. An entire morning of entertainment for less than the price of a modern Mars bar. Then, Friday night, the best night of the week in any working-class household in Britain. Dad walks to the chip shop at 6:30. Mum has already set the plates out on the formica table in the kitchen. He comes back 10 minutes later carrying a warm newspaper parcel under his arm. Fish and chips for 4. The vinegar has soaked through the paper. The smell fills the whole house. The kitchen is warm. The telly is on in the next room. Coronation Street starts at 7:30. The whole family eats together. Total cost, well under £1. And it was not just the chippy, it was the services that came to your door. The milkman arrived before dawn, 2 pints of Gold Top on the step every morning. The bread van came twice a week. And then there was the Corona Popman. He turned up on a Saturday with crates of fizzy drinks on the back of his lorry. Dandelion and burdock, Cherryade, cream soda. You gave him back the empty bottles, and he gave you full ones at a few pence each. These were not luxuries. This was just how life worked. Services designed for ordinary streets, priced for ordinary people, delivered by blokes who knew your family by name. So what happened? How did Britain go from a country where £1 could buy a family a proper Friday evening to a country where £1 barely covers a bag of crisps from a vending machine? The first blow came in October 1973. The Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries announced an oil embargo. Within weeks, petrol prices in Britain began to climb. The 3-day week followed in January 1974. Prime Minister Edward Heath ordered businesses to limit their electricity use to 3 consecutive days a week. Factories shut down. The streetlights went dark. Families ate dinner by candlelight, not for romance, because the power was off. The effect on prices was savage. By 1975, inflation in Britain hit 24.2%. The Office for National Statistics confirmed it was the highest peacetime figure in modern British history. Wages were rising, but prices were rising faster. The weekly shop that cost £3 in 1971 cost £5 by 1975 and nearly £9 by 1979. Every Thursday, that brown wage packet felt a little lighter even when the number inside was bigger. Some blamed decimalisation. When Britain switched from pounds, shillings and pence to the new decimal currency on the 15th of February 1971, shopkeepers were accused of rounding prices upward. A loaf that cost 1 shilling and 8 pence should have become about 8 pence in new money. Somehow it became 10. A pint of milk that cost 4 old pence became 2.5 new pence, then 3, then 4. The coins felt wrong. Too light, too small. The old half-crown had weight. It felt like money. The new 5-pence piece felt like a token from a seaside arcade. Then came 1979. Margaret Thatcher walked into Downing Street, and a different kind of transformation began. The factories that had employed entire towns started closing. The coal mines, the steelworks, the shipyards on the Tyne and the Clyde, the textile mills in Lancashire and Yorkshire. Between 1979 and 1984, Britain lost over 2 million manufacturing jobs. The communities that had been built around those jobs, the pubs, the working men's clubs, the corner shops, the chippies, began to disappear with them. The prices kept climbing, but the wages in many towns stopped climbing altogether. And housing. That might be the cruelest change of all. In 1970, the average home cost 4.1 times the average yearly income. Today, according to research published by the House Buyer Bureau using Office for National Statistics data, it costs 8 times the average salary, more than double. A first-time buyer in 1975 needed a deposit they could save in 2 or 3 years. A first-time buyer in 2025 needs a deposit that might take 10 years or more to accumulate, if they can do it at all. In places like Oxford, Bristol, and most of the southeast, the ratio is even worse. Young people are not less hard-working than their parents were. The maths has simply been rigged against them. And perhaps that is the real cost of what we lost. Not just the prices, something bigger, something you cannot put a number on. When a pound could buy a round at the pub, it bought more than beer. It bought Tuesday evenings with your mates after a long shift. It bought the conversation that kept loneliness at bay. When fish and chips cost 25 pence, it was not just dinner. It was the smell of Friday. The whole family rounds one table. Mum moaning about the vinegar. Dad sneaking a chip off your plate when he thought you were not looking. When the milkman came every morning and the Corona man came every Saturday, it was not just delivery. It was a street that knew itself. Neighbours who nodded at each other. A world that moved at walking pace. Those things did not disappear because people stopped wanting them. They disappeared because the numbers stopped working. The corner shop could not compete with the supermarket. The milkman could not compete with the plastic bottle. The local chippy could not compete with the fast food chain. The pub could not compete with the price of a television and a 4-pack from the off-license. One by one, the rituals that had held communities together for generations were priced out, competed out, and closed down. Today, over 10,000 pubs have closed in Britain since the year 2000. The number of independent fish and chip shops has fallen from over 30,000 in the early 1970s to fewer than 10,500 today. Woolworths, where every child in Britain once spent their pocket money on pick and mix, closed its doors for the last time in January 2009. The milkman, the bread van, the Corona pop lorry, all gone, replaced by nothing, just an empty space where the community used to be. The pound note itself is gone too, replaced in 1983 by a coin, smaller, harder, easier to lose, down the back of the sofa. The green note with the portrait of Sir Isaac Newton on the back used to feel like something. You folded it carefully, you put it in the inside pocket. It meant a night out, or a week's worth of dinners, or a trip to the seaside for the kids. The coin means a trolley at the supermarket. If you can find one that works, maybe it sounds like rose-tinted glasses. Maybe people will say, oh, it was not really like that. There were power cuts and strikes and the rubbish piled up in Leicester Square. And yes, all of that is true. 1976 was boiling hot, and 1978 was freezing cold, and the winter of discontent was grim for everyone. Nobody is pretending Britain in the 1970s was perfect. But it was affordable, it was manageable. A working family could eat well, live decently, treat themselves on a Friday, and put a little away for the future. The numbers worked. The social contract held. You did your job, you got your wage, and your wage could buy you a life. Not a glamorous life, but a good one, a proper one. The kind of life where you could walk to the pub and walk home again and never once check your bank balance on a phone because you already knew you had enough. That is what £1 bought in 1970s Britain. Not just goods, not just services, a life that made sense. And somewhere between then and now, we let it slip through our fingers like loose change on a Thursday night. Do you remember what £1 used to buy when you were growing up? What was the price of your fish and chips? Your first pint? Your Saturday sweets? Drop your memories in the comments below, because those stories matter more than any statistic. And if this video took you back to a Britain that felt like home, hit that subscribe button. We have got more stories from the country we remember, and we are only just getting started.